Welcome to this week's episode of Weather Extra. I'm First Alert meteorologist Jillian Johnson. We kick off this week's show by looking at the very powerful earthquake that struck off the coast of Russia this past Tuesday, July 29th. The magnitude 8.8 quake was among the top 6 strongest on record for our planet. Significant damage to buildings was reported along the Pacific coast towns in Russia. This earthquake also triggered a tsunami. Waves traveled over 3,500 miles across the Pacific Ocean and impacted the coast of Russia and Japan, and also parts of the United States, like in Hawaii and Alaska and up and down the West Coast. 4 to nearly 7-foot waves hit along the Hawaiian Islands, which caused some flooding along the coastlines. Tsunami waves between 1 to 4 feet struck the California coast. Thankfully, no major damage was reported there. And to the other top weather story from the past week, parts of the United States dealt with another week of life-threatening heat. Nearly 160 million Americans saw record temperatures as we closed out the month of July. More than 25 states from along the Gulf Coast up through the Midwest and even into New England were under extreme heat warnings or heat advisories once again last week. Now, the ridge of high pressure that caused those dangerously hot temperatures and high humidity also brought rounds of severe storms into the northern parts of the nation. We now bring in First Alert meteorologist Sean Bellafury, who takes a look back at the weather setup from across the nation last week.
The extreme heat and extreme humidity that built across the southern United States for the last few days of July, well, these are eye-boggling numbers. 106 for a heat index Monday afternoon in Kansas City, 110 St. Louis, 107 in Memphis, and even 115 degrees for a heat index in Charleston, South Carolina. The culprit, a ridge of high pressure, the traditional summertime heat dome, which moved its way from the southeastern United States into the southern U.S. But we're not focused on the heat dome and what the heat is doing. We're focused on the thunderstorms that rode along the ridge. These are called ridge runner thunderstorms, typically forming on the northern side of that clockwise flow of high pressure. And these storms unfortunately packed a very hefty punch Monday night into Tuesday morning in South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. 2 clusters of thunderstorms push their way through those states, and one of them gets a special designation called a derecho. We've talked about this every now and again. They do happen here in Texas. A derecho is a long-lasting storm system that produces wind gust damage and typically shows up as a squall line. Here's where it gets its designation as a derecho. You need to have a near continuous swath of 58+ mile-per-hour wind gusts, and those gusts must extend more than 240 miles or roughly about 300 kilometers. These were the storm reports from Monday night and Tuesday morning with those 2 clusters of storms. The one that started in Nebraska moving its way into Iowa, over 400 miles, classified as a derecho, but the one that impacted Minnesota, only 185 miles. These are some pretty hefty thunderstorms. Some of these wind gust damage reports 79 mile-per-hour gusts in Rock Rapids, 92 in Spencer, Iowa, and near 100 miles per hour in Sioux Center, Iowa. These storms starting out as individual supercell thunderstorms, but because of all the heat and humidity, a boatload of instability was in front of them. And as the afternoon progressed into the evening, that line of storms zapped into the extreme instability, bringing those strong wind gusts. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafury, KWTX News 10.
After deadly floods have swept through parts of Texas in July, experts are warning that another southern state could be next. Bill Weir takes us to Georgia, where a leading hydrologist says the conditions are ripe for a catastrophic flooding event.
On a hot day in the mountains of North Georgia, few places are more inviting than the Chattahoochee River. And tubing the hooch on days like this makes it easy to forget that the same waterway providing so much joy can take life and property in a flash. And when the Chattahoochee turned deadly 16 years back, it changed both Georgia and Laura Belanger, one of the top hydrologists in the South.
So I am in the position I'm in today because of the September 2009 floods. I was young in my career at the time, and there were 10 fatalities in the state of Georgia. That left a lasting impression on me, and wanting to kind of see how we could do better with our hydro services and getting those warnings out. That's what helped be a catalyst for those flash flood warnings to be included in wireless emergency alerts.
Today in the tourist town of Helen, Georgia, those wireless alerts and weather radios are the only sources of flash flood warning. because in a place like this, sirens might confuse people to run for low ground from a tornado instead of high ground from a flash flood. It's been a long time since the water topped that 10-foot marker. It hit 12 feet back in '67. And while there have been some swift water rescues in recent weeks, most people don't remember really high water.
That's the thing that struck me in Texas there. It reminded me more of covering a tsunami in Japan, where children were swept away while they debated what to do because no one could imagine the worst. And when you're watching tubers here, you can't imagine that water turning deadly.
It's hard to get, especially with how shallow it is at the moment, it is hard to digest what a big amount of water coming through here would look like and how it's inundated.
And she is especially worried about Enchanted Valley, just over the hills. The folks living in these permanent trailers sit smack dab on the Hiawassee River next to one of the flashiest river gauges in the nation.
And so those are the places that keep me up at night. Regardless of the amount of readiness or preparation, the fact that there are people and property that close to the river, that's what the concern is. The biggest question we get is when we see a 100-year floodplain and maybe the water level has risen to this point and someone says, oh, thank goodness, we don't have to deal with this for 99 more years. and it happens. Right. The reality is what that means is that there's a 1 in 100 chance of occurrence in a given year of that happening again.
Right. But that math is changing, right?
But that math changes over time as you see flooding occur more frequently.
Saltwater is expected to pose a threat to our planet over the next few decades. According to a NASA study, seawater will penetrate underground freshwater supplies in 3/4 of coastal areas worldwide by the year 2100. The phenomenon is called saltwater intrusion, and researchers say 2 climate issues are facilitating the flow. They say planetary warming and slower groundwater recharge from a lack of rain is causing the saltwater to overtake freshwater in some locations. Researchers say this intrusion of saltwater into coastal groundwater could damage ecosystems and corrode infrastructure. So how does this slow motion crisis impact farmland in coastal regions? Here's National Environmental Correspondent David Schechter with some answers.
I love life. I love watching things grow.
On Paul Cartanza's farm, 2.5 miles from the Delaware Bay, he faces an emerging threat his father and grandfather never did when they were farmers. Saltwater, which kills corn, is getting into his crops. One study estimates salt intrusion could damage up to $100 million of mid-Atlantic farmland each year.
There's probably 12 or 16 rows of corn that we would use to plant here when we didn't have the salt intrusion.
So this would have been pointless to put corn here because it wouldn't make it?
Yes.
The area where saltwater meets freshwater is called the salt wedge. With climate change causing sea levels to rise, more saltwater is pushing up the river. And during a drought, less water is flowing down. The combination allows the wedge to push even further up. And that's what happened last summer in Philadelphia, which gets nearly 60% of its water from the Delaware. Saltwater moved 20 miles towards one of its drinking water intakes.
You see the tops of the dead trees.
Holly Michael, a professor at the University of Delaware, studies saltwater problems, and the biggest one is how it impacts our drinking water.
Salt is corrosive. For example, if there are lead pipes, you certainly don't want lead corroding and leaching into your water.
The agency responsible for managing the Delaware has released water from dams to push the salt back downstream 5 times in the last 10 years.
We should be worried about our water resources. It's a connected system.
Yeah.
So every piece of it matters.
Cartanza was worried enough about the problem to invite scientists to install pipes, tubes, and instruments on his farm to study what's happening here in hopes that they can find ways to adapt to the changes.
I just want to know what's happening in the soils and how fast the intrusion is coming in.
David Schechter, CBS News.
Natural disasters are causing insurance companies to raise policy prices across the nation. We have more on what you can do to try and save money coming up next on Weather Extra right after the break. According to a new study, extreme weather is making basic food products more expensive across the globe. The study was led by Maximilian Kotz of the Barcelona Supercomputer Center. Research found a wide range of goods saw dramatic spikes in recent years due to extreme weather conditions that went beyond, quote, all historic precedent prior to 2020. Previous studies have looked at how high temperatures have affected food produce cost in the long term. This new research examined short-term price spikes around the world as a result of extreme heat, drought, or heavy precipitation between 2022 and 2024. One example, prices for olive oil. That product saw a 50% price spike in Europe in January of 2024 from the year earlier. It was the effect of a prolonged drought across Italy and Spain in 2022 and 2023. And higher global temperatures could crush food crops worldwide over the next few decades. Researchers say the overall food system could fall 50% by the end of the century, according to an 8-year study published in the journal Nature. Scientists studied 6 crops, including maize, rice, and wheat. They found that for every 1 degree Celsius the world warms above pre-industrial levels, global food production drops by roughly 120 calories per person daily. They say that will eventually cause food prices to rise and make access to getting food more difficult. Researchers say this could greatly affect the U.S. in particular, where crop yields for most crops, aside from rice, are expected to be reduced by at least 40%. And continuing in the United States, raging wildfires and severe storms are driving up global insurance losses. Those losses have totaled an estimated $84 billion for the first 6 months of the year, according to a report by a reinsurance broker. Wildfires that raged across Southern California back in January accounted for about $40 billion of the total. Meanwhile, severe storms that created damaging tornadoes, winds, and hail, mainly in the Midwest and South, accounted for at least $33 billion in losses. The report said it's been the costliest first 6 months of the year since 2011, and insurance losses are expected to surpass $100 billion for the entire year. And with the average home insurance policy cost going up across the nation, Jen Sullivan now joins us to take a look at those rising policy prices and has more on what you can do to try to save money.
From ravenous wildfires to devastating tornadoes, natural disasters are becoming more frequent and more intense. Last year, there were 27 confirmed weather and climate disasters in the U.S., with losses exceeding $1 billion, according to NOAA. Because of this, many home insurance companies are raising policy rates.
There are more natural disasters happening, and they're affecting more homes.
Holden Lewis with NerdWallet says they recently conducted a survey among homeowners and found 54% said their premiums have gone up in the last 12 months. These rate hikes aren't specific to certain states, it's nationwide.
They end up having to pass along some of those costs to states that might have fewer natural disasters.
State Farm recently raised home insurance rates by an average of 27.2% in Illinois. They say it's because in 2024, for every dollar they collected from policyholders, State Farm paid out $1.26. State Farm said Illinois had the second highest hailstorm damage claims last year, totaling $638 million. Telling CNN in part, accurate risk-based pricing makes sure that insurers like State Farm can pay claims during some of life's toughest moments for policyholders.
Some of the most costly natural disasters are hailstorms.
Inflation and the rising cost of supplies is also contributing to higher premiums. But Lewis says there are things you can do to help lower your rates. Adding roof trusses or upgrading your garage door can help get a better rate. Also installing fire alarms and security systems. And shop around to compare different companies' premiums. For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
And just as a quick reminder, home insurance does not cover flooding. That is a separate policy altogether. All right, straight ahead on Weather Extra is this week's Degrees of Science. In this week's episode, we speak with a pet trainer to learn more about how to keep our furry friends safe as temperatures rise. Welcome back to Weather Extra. We know that the heat in Central Texas can be brutal, not only for us, but also for our four-legged friends. In this week's Degrees of Science, First Alert meteorologist C.D. Finley catches up with a pet trainer to learn more about ways to keep your pet safe during the summer heat.
First and foremost, with your experience with Rover and dog training and just the experiences that you've had, what kind of situations do you usually see, especially this time of year, in regard to the heat with pet owners and stuff like that?
Absolutely. pets overheating is a common but can be actually deadly thing that can happen to them. So, and that could be simply just going for too long of a walk, deciding to take them to the beach and them overheating. Some people even decide to go hiking during this time. So we need to plan ahead. We want to make sure our dogs aren't getting heat stroke, and they're also protecting their paw pads, because that asphalt can get really hot and something not always we think about right away. So we want to make sure they're safe all over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So of course here in Central Texas, I mean, Central Texans, if you've been here long enough, you would know. But here it gets really hot in the summertime. I mean, we usually see triple digits on the norm around, especially as we get into the depths of summer. So with that in mind, you know, how hot is too hot to have your pets outside?
So that's going to depend a lot on your pet, your pet's breed, their age, their health. But a general rule of thumb we can do is when it is getting up in these triple digits, even the 90s, we want to try to do our walks much earlier in the day, later in the evening, when the air's not so hot, the ground's not so hot, and try to make those our activities. Go out for our potty breaks then. If your dog is a dog that needs longer walks, that's the time of day to be doing it. Once it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock even, it gets hot out there. So we want to make sure we're getting them out exercised nice and early.
Say a pet had to be outside when it was hot. How long should they be outside, and what can a pet owner do to prevent their, paws from being affected by the really warm ground?
I love this question, and there's a couple answers to this. First of all is try to check the ground temperature. So what I do is I take the back of my hand and I put it down on the asphalt. If you can't keep it there for 5 seconds, it's probably too hot for your pet's paws themselves. So of course, try to limit our time. Sometimes that's not always possible. So look into some dog booties that can protect their paws, especially as this temperature rises. Paw burns are a real thing that actually do happen. Try to walk them on grass. AstroTurf does heat up as well, so don't just think because it's fake grass our pet's paws are protected. That can also happen at the beach. Sand gets super, super hot, so don't take that for granted as well. Like, be sure to be checking those temperatures. Overall, if we do have to take them out in those temperatures, look into cooling products. There's amazing dog cooling jackets, bandanas out there. That's what I do if I take my dog out for a walk, or even just take him to the vet. Quick outside can get really hot. So I love Back on Track makes amazing ones, but there's tons of them out there. Definitely something to look at, because that can really help lower our dog's core temperature.
What else can pet owners do to kind of help their pets, especially in the heat that we usually see in the Texas summer?
Of course, keep them in air-conditioned spaces, shaded spaces as much as possible, ample access to nice, cool water, and then learn the signs of your pet becoming overheated. When a dog becomes overheated, time really is critical, and the faster we can get them help or out of the heat, more likely they'll recover just fine. Start to learn those signs, and then know where your local emergency vet is, and have a game plan of what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicole, obviously you've been working with Rover, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what Rover actually is, what Rover can do for pet owners?
Absolutely. Rover's one of the largest marketplaces for pet care services. So whether we need a dog walker, dog sitter, dog daycare, dog trainers, it's all across the market where you can find someone that loves your pet, take care of them, help you with them when you need. And that's great if your air conditioning's out. Find a pet sitter. Let your dog go cool off in the air conditioning for a daycare during the day. So we have lots of options out there, and it's nice there's people right in your community, someone even potentially down the street from you. So we can take a look on there, do a meet and greet, meet them ahead of time, and find the best fit for your pet.
To hear more about how to keep your pets safe during the hot summer months, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube, or go to KWTX.com/Degrees of Science. Up next on Weather Extra, we're hitting the high seas for your health. Dan Smith shows how important vitamin C can be in your moment of science. Welcome back to Weather Extra. You hear it all the time. Make sure to eat your fruits and vegetables. Dan Smith tells us more on why we should and has the benefits of one vital vitamin in our diet. Here's your moment of science.
They're organic compounds that our body needs to function, and no, your morning coffee on its own does not count. This week we're focusing on vitamins, but one in particular you'd have to see to believe. While we've only really known about vitamins for 100 years, you can certainly trace the impact of a lack of it back for centuries. Between the 16th and 18th centuries alone, an estimated 2 million sailors died of scurvy. A Scottish physician cracked the code in the 1700s, finding that it stemmed from a lack of citrus fruit. Relying on a diet of salted meat for months at sea ought to do that. He recommended a mix of lemons and limes for Royal Navy officers, supposedly giving rise to the nickname Limeys from the U.S. Navy, though Dr. William Barton got the same practice going stateside in the early 1800s. Through early 20th century trial and error, vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, was eventually isolated, becoming the first vitamin to be chemically produced. We've seen what no vitamin C can lead to, but here's what it actually does for you. It repairs tissue, bones, and cartilage, helps your body absorb iron, and even forms collagen, a protein found in everything from your skin to your blood vessels. One thing it actually cannot do is prevent the common cold, though a healthy dose on the regular can reduce the length of a cold and its severity. Vitamin C helps make white blood cells, after all, and protects them from damage to better fight off infection. Now, your body does not naturally produce vitamin C. The sailors ought to be your good clue, and you might have gone straight to oranges as your #1 source. It's not a bad choice, but in truth, oranges have less vitamin C content gram for gram than strawberries, broccoli, even some peppers. No matter your choice, the best part is the leftovers leave your body through the usual means. However, the daily recommendation for adults is 75 to 90 milligrams a day, so too much of those supplements can lead to gut issues. It's leaving your body one way or another. One last note, vitamin C has also shown some promise for treating certain cancers. When ascorbic acid breaks down, it releases hydrogen peroxide. And a 2017 study found that flooding cancer cells with that H2O2 can selectively eliminate them. More research is needed, of course, but it is a promising path all the same. For this week's Moment of Science, I'm Dan Smith.
Thanks for tuning into Weather Extra. That's all we have for you for this week's episode. We'll see you right back here next weekend for another half hour of nothing but weather and science. Have a great week.